So, welcome, everybody. I decided to do something fun and different today. So, that's why I'm sitting at the table. If you guys can figure out how to do it on your Zoom, that would be great to have more people at the table, make it a little bit fun and engaging today, as we're talking about one of my many favorite topics, which is negotiating. So, today we'll be talking a little bit about the art of negotiation, what it looks like, and things that you should be considering when negotiating. When I posted this particular topic, they got a lot of feedback. And one of the questions that one of the members shared about it was how to do it and or feeling any sort of anxiety or nervousness around doing it. So if you guys are like me or similar, were you nervous at the point that you actually had to negotiate? And it doesn't have to necessarily be a bill rate, even though that's definitely, the primary thing that we'll talk about. But you want to think about, really, you can negotiate everything. And when I mean everything, I really do mean everything. So everything is negotiable in my life. It did take me some time to get to that place, but it's important to understand um, that it's all about the approach and your mindset. So there are definitely soft skills. Go ahead. Okay. So there are definitely soft skills that you have to learn as a small business owner, and then there are skills that you can go to classes and things like that and learn. So negotiating, marketing, sales, and things like that are really your soft skills that you have to learn a little bit, but in order to kind of perfect it, you really have to work at it. So you have to be adding it into your daily lives as something that you do. So, all right, as always, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, a little bit about what negotiation is. So, negotiation really is similar to bartering. So, one of the things that I think about when I think about negotiation is being adaptable to ever changing circumstances, and able to go into a situation thinking about what's in it for not just you, but what's in it for them. So, negotiating in a way or from a place that allows you to think through what's happening in that situation and how I can make sure that it's a win win or a beneficial situation. So, not everything that you negotiate in the moment is something that you get as a win-win. There's win-loss, loss-win, depending on the mindset. So because negotiation is an essential skill for you, it should be a part of all of your life. For some people, it's only elements of their lives. They spend a lot of time focusing it on business, but it really can operate in other elements of your lives. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Um, So many people believe that negotiations are all or nothing and that there has to be one winner and one loser. And that's not necessarily the case. And it's really nothing could be further from the truth. While the goal of negotiation is to, so the goal of negotiation is to, okay. While the goal of negotiations most certainly is getting what you want, the fact is the best deals, the ones that stick, incorporate terms and ideas from both parties. So that's why I was saying some instances it may be a win-win, a win-loss, but nonetheless, when you go in with the mindset of making sure that you think about what the other person may benefit from the situation, you end out a lot better. So here's a couple of steps to master in the art of negotiation that I'll go through. Like I said, I'm not sharing the presentation, but if you want to see the presentation, I can share it with you. But I just want to drop on some or top. I just want to touch on some things from the presentation, so that's partially why I'm not sharing it. One of the things you want to think about is the establishment of relationships. And these aren't just business relationships, but really all of your relationships. Like I mentioned early on, I'm a big advocate of networking. So within the group, I've had the opportunity to connect with people because not every situation is there the immediate opportunity to negotiate something or see a win-win opportunity with someone. But once you build the relationship, you kind of establish it so that if that situation does present itself, you guys already have a mutual understanding about who you are and what it is that you do. So you are best positioned to negotiate when the other party respects you, not only as a business person, but also as a human being. Trust, which is gained throughout the process, is key to successful negotiation. Number 2, choose honey over vinegar. This is a great one just because in business, as business owners, as NOSAs, really in life, there's always opportunities where you may feel like you want to kind of cut the ties or cut the cord of that situation in regards to it having maybe an initial negative outcome, or maybe you and that individual didn't have a good first impression of each other. So understanding choosing honey over vinegar is important because you never should underestimate the natural ability of other people to sense who you really are, especially if you're being or they're being disingenuous or manipulative or secretive about things. This particular step is similar to burning bridges. And I tell the story 110 times about the fact that nursing is big, but nursing is small. Just like business, the whole healthcare staffing is big, but it's very small. So understanding that is key in the interactions that you have with people on a regular basis. The example I give about travel nursing is I worked with a nurse in Hawaii 5 or 6 years ago. Really clicked, kept in touch, lost touch. I worked with that same nurse in Vermont maybe a year or so later. So people remember you. People remember the connections in positive ways in the same way that they also remember any negative interactions as well. So you kind of have to make sure that you're being mindful of that when you're interacting with people at any level, whether it's business to business or employees to agencies. Number 3, focus on the win-win. So mindset, and I posted that in the group under the question when one of the members was saying she had some anxiety, is you want it to be equally as beneficial to the other person as it'll be for you. So it's not to say that they become the priority, but if you go in trying to only consider your needs, you'll miss out on some things. And it could be that you'll miss out on future relationships that you might have with that person. Okay, so if you guys can mute your phones, that'd be great. The other thing is win-wins are the only way to go, and that's how you have to think about situations. If you approach a negotiation thinking only about yourself, you are not probably going to get the things that you need. Understanding what all parties need. And for us in the healthcare space, they need staff. You need to place your staff. They need jobs filled. You want to get those jobs filled. That's kind of where you want to think about it, because yes, they may, say, hey, your pay rates are too high. And we'll get into that because I know that's one of the questions. Or, this person isn't working out, but you have to think about it from their perspective of, hey, they have a set budget. So as we go towards the end of the year, more companies are being mindful of their budget. We entered in for the companies that run the fiscal year, like the federal government, they've just opened up monies for the fiscal year. So if that's not something that you're aware of for your clients and that you don't know how their budget runs, then you may have clients who will come back and say, oh, well, this is too much. But maybe if you talk to them in January, okay, we can do it. So it's not always as cut and dry as you see things from the perspective as a business owner or a NOSA. Keep in mind that seeing things only black and white, win-lose, creates limited thinking and your ability to effectively negotiate. Number 4, embody your inner adult. So people can be all kinds of ways in business. And your interactions with them matter. The burning of the bridge matters. How you interact and how people remember you does matter. It doesn't mean that you have to eat everything that someone says, but you want to make sure that you're always maintaining, your professionalism. You want to make sure that you're thinking about the future of your business and the reputation that it'll kind of leave with your business. So you want to always think about things at a higher level versus what actually might be happening in that particular moment. And then the last one, of course, is respect the rhythm of the relationship. So I'm big on networking, which is essentially an extension of a relationship. And oftentimes you don't want to be super pushy when it comes to new clients, in that there may be a process. They may not be ready. They may have misconceptions about what staffing agencies offer. So you never know when you're going to get that yes, but you always want to make sure that you're prepared on your end to turn a no into a yes or a maybe, as well as make sure that you're mindful of if this is a good yes or a bad yes, or should this be something that I want to negotiate. So as I mentioned before, the art of negotiation or negotiating period, I negotiate everything in my life. So some other things to consider before entering any formal negotiation. And this is where I'll use a couple of analogies. And if you guys have situations that you want me to touch on a little bit, we can as well, around what to think about. So you want to have the right mindset. So yes, you should reach out to clients to see if they have opportunities for you to staff, but you want to do your research about that particular client. So you want to know, do they have jobs open on Indeed? Do they work with other agencies? Who those other agencies are? Because that's when you kind of position yourself for leverage. You also want to think about, what do I want to get out of this particular interaction with them beyond the signing of the contract? There have been NOSAs that I've worked with and talked to, and I think I recently talked with one today, around the fact that them offering a low bill rate and low as variable shouldn't be the only reason that you say no to the client. So today I talked with the NOSA, and she was speaking about like a clause in one of the rates, and she said that the administrator said our bill rates were too high. And I replied to her, I said, well, this is your first contract. You really want to think about what else they have to offer. Do they have other facilities nearby? Do they have other facilities in other states? Is this a contract that I have in place that's for the year, which I would caution, or is this a 6-month contract? That's where you want to think through some of the, hey, is it something that I can change that makes it beneficial to them? If they're not able to pay whatever the bill rate is for whatever reason that they give, is there something else that I can negotiate in that situation? But before you get there, you want to have done your research. So you don't want to be in the moment negotiating, going through and Googling about that organization, what they do and how they operate. You want to have already done the homework, so that when they say, oh, hey, our bill rate is too high, okay, that might not be an issue for you, or that might be something to work with, but that you can easily go back and say, hey, I noticed you guys have a couple of other facilities on the north side, east side, west side of town. Is there a possibility for you to connect me with the VP, the operational manager, so that I too can have access to those facilities? Or are you the managing partner for those facilities so that I can staff there as well? Kind of before the call got started, I was chatting a little bit about the fact that with Crucial and Favorite and some of your bigger agencies, a lot of times the way that they make money isn't off of a high bill rate, because if you get a chance to ever investigate their bill rates, they're not that high per se. They actually make money off of volume. Crucial has huge overheads. Favorite for sure, not sure about Crucial, but they have overhead staff that they have to pay out. So there's no way for them to be able to have one good contract and sufficiently maintain their staff and pay them. They have to have multiple contracts and multiple people working. So that becomes their ability to service an entire state, or that allows them to be able to do what Crucial's done in Texas, where they're deploying 300 people, or they're deploying 100 people here and there, because they have the because they have the overhead staff in place to do that for them. So I think we had some questions, and then I'll wrap up more of the art as far as how you go in and build the confidence. So any questions, guys? I think Laquana, you had a question. Okay, I'm going to. Okay. Okay, so I see a question from Laquana, and then I see Shanika. So, Laquana's question is, go ahead and mute your phones because I get a lot of feedback if you don't mute the phone. So if you can mute the phone, that would be great. Volume over volume over volume. Right. I want to lower my pay rates, but I'm willing to lower my profit if the volume is correct. Do you think this is the right way to do? So she says, I'm starting to get a lot of pushback on bill rates in the Bay Area. She's in California. I don't want to lower my pay rates, but I'm willing to lower my profit if the volume is correct. Do you think this is the right way to go? I guess the question, Laquana, that I would think about is, one, are you seeing the pay rates go down in your area? And then also, if they're pushing back, like $1 or $2 isn't a big difference, to be honest. But you want to think about what else can they offer you. So are they offering you, because I know you do a lot of per diem, are they offering you some sort of exclusivity? Are they offering you first opportunity to placement, which is just a option of if they have an opening, they'll reach out to you first and allow you to place the job, give you 24 hours or whatever to place the job. If you don't place it, then they'll put it out to the rest of the agencies. And for some of you guys who might be newer in the industry, understand that facilities work with multiple agencies. But there are facilities that give exclusivity to agencies, like Kaiser is one of them that gives exclusivity to A&M Healthcare. So you want to kind of be mindful of that. And that's kind of what you can negotiate. I don't think I want to lower the pay rates. I probably wouldn't lower pay rates just yet because it's about to be the holidays. And you may not have to lower your profit margin, Laquana, if they are going to give you some sort of exclusivity, and that'll increase your volume. Okay, so Shanika's asking, so is it better to have a lower bill rate and a higher pay? No. So that wouldn't be the model. And some of this you want to kind of plan out early on, but if you're kind of in a mix of it and you're figuring it out, I would never do a lower bill rate and a higher pay rate as a form of a business model for marketing or negotiating. The example I gave, or the situation for that particular NOSA, was around 3 things that I think you should consider when you're trying to negotiate. Do they have, of course, research in the facility? Do they have other locations in the area? So having other locations increases your volume. Do they have other locations in other states? That'll increase your ability to recruit outside of your state and potentially have contract opportunities. One, do they have contract opportunities? So if you're doing a lot of per diem, locking in a contract is beneficial to you because typically that person gets a consistent schedule that you don't have to manage, and you can include guarantees, guarantee 40, guarantee 36 on that particular contract, so that's money that you're going to get no matter what, which isn't really the case in your per diem space. And in that particular scenario, this NOSA, the facility pushed back about the bill rate, but they had other properties in the area. For example, it wasn't Kindred, but I'm going to use Kindred as the name. Kindred has multiple facilities in certain states. So getting connected to all of the Kindred properties and making that a condition of this particular bill rate is fine, because you can always increase the bill rate later. So the other thing too is, don't lock yourself into 1-year contracts on your rates. That's just something people do. But because we know that the industry still hasn't really stabilized, don't do 1-year contracts, because then that limits your ability to renegotiate. Not to say that you can't, because you can have your contract decide in December, when they're going to be really strapped to find people because people take holiday breaks. Hey, I want to renegotiate. You can always renegotiate the rate at any point, but by giving it a 6-month contract really allows you to evaluate how your staff is doing, evaluate how they're doing as a client, and then also when you're submitting your request in writing to have a conversation to renegotiate things, you have proof. You can say, hey, on average, we're doing 15 people, we're billing 1,000 hours a week. We've gotten great feedback from our employees. We've had 7 of these employees consistently work at your facility. You name requested these employees to come back for different shifts and potentially have contracts. So you actually have a list of your accolades and things that you've done to benefit the company and ways that you've been able to save them money, so that they don't have to go to other agencies. So Shanika says she's encountered an applicant wanting a higher rate, that are 1099 with other agencies. Um, that's a tricky one because it's talking about 2 different things, but I'll say this, and I think your name was Marquise. And so Marquise dropped in a little bit earlier, and I touched on this with her, which I think is of value to everybody. For NOSAs and small agency owners, it's kind of an analogy similar to low-hanging fruit. You have to understand that if someone wants to work for you, they'll come and work for you. So in our industry, we have so many options that I don't get into the practice, and I'm going to encourage you guys not to get into the practice of negotiating with people on things that they want where it changes how you do business. So if you're a W-2 agency, we're not having a discussion about 1099s. And if she wants to be a 1099 agent, a 1099 person, that's fine. But I'm not a 1099 agency. I do know of the particulars we talked about the 1099 with other agencies, but you can also offer other perks. I tell people, tell your nurse own. You can have Uber Eats Cash, those types of things, other types of benefits that make it worthwhile. But in that instance, the only reason that they can offer a higher rate is because they're 1099, which also means they're not paying taxes on their employees. And then the employee has to pay their own taxes, which can be a little bit tricky. And it's you kind of have to go with what works and maybe not target those employees or figure out what else they want. So in that instance, if these employees are with the company and they also want to get same day pay, hey, that's something that I can offer you. But the whole 1099 discussion, I'm not going to get into too much because it's super complicated. But negotiating with employees can be a little tricky because sometimes you're tapping into the wrong pool. So applicants who, and it's not to say that you should not work with these applicants, but applicants who heavily work for Favorite, Crucial, and who are looking for crisis rates aren't a good fit for my agency. So being honest and transparent with them early on in the conversation will make them go away. Okay. And Shanika saying my competitors have multiple facilities and paying staff $1 to $3 more as a 1099. I don't, Shanika, honestly, and I think we've touched on this. I don't think your employees or people aren't not working for you because $1 to $3. I think there may be something else going on. I don't know if that particular company is at the same facilities that you're at, but I don't feel like that's enough of a change for them not to work. But I think you also have to take into account that that's just the climate we're in. And you want to think about what else can I offer them that isn't going to impact the way that I do business. And it could be massages. We as an agency looked into doing foot massages and things like that. I just recently heard from another friend of mine who's a nurse about Crucial offering Crucial bucks and Crucial discounts and things like that. So you really have to get creative when you're trying to negotiate with applicants, but you also kind of have to set a point at which you say, okay, one, either I'm going down the wrong road with the wrong types of applicants, or I need to change my recruiting efforts so that I tap into the applicants who are more applicable to what I can offer. Okay, so LaQuana is saying her competitors are paying $10 more, but are 1099. So LaQuana, are your people leaving because of this? Is that what you're saying? And feel free to drop questions if you want to take yourself off mute. You can ask some questions, and then I'm going to jump back into the presentation, and we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So you can drop questions in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself, feel free. So a couple of things to consider when we think about negotiation is the type of negotiation. So there's definitely different types of it. You can do it in person, you can do it via the phone, which I think most of us are doing. And then you can also do it via email or mail. The type of negotiation I would suggest to do is email. The phone is good. I think it's the most likely used type of negotiation process, but on the phone, you kind of leave the door open to people's interpretation, whereas via email or written, it's very clear, and it allows you to kind of look over things and, recap, any conversation that you had, but it allows you to look over things and kind of sit with it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about phone negotiation and in person, and then we'll talk lastly about email. So in-person negotiation, ideally, which is rare to happen, but you want to identify the goals and objectives of the process, and you want to allow each person to present their negotiation terms and what they're looking for. And more than any of those things, you want to listen, because a lot of times when you're talking to people, even at the point that you make the initial call to potential clients, they kind of tell you what they're looking for. If the conversation goes something like this, where they're saying, oh, it would be great to work with a local agency, oh, and you're nurse owned and so on and so forth. We're having a hard time with getting people to stay or to work, or we're having a lot of call outs on weekends. We're having a lot of people not show up for our night shift. So from there, that's kind of where you kind of have opportunities to negotiate a situation. You can exclusively recruit night shift and weekend nurses. You can focus on people who are looking for second jobs, who would be comfortable with doing weekend nursing. You can also consider, what we tried is on-call nursing for nights and weekends. It's a little tricky. I think it's worth a try, but you just have to get creative with it to meet the needs of that particular company. And if you offer guarantees to them, oh, well, we can guarantee, hey, for 4 weeks or 3 days out of every month, that we have a night nurse available. And then the other thing on the employee side of things is to offer, if that particular client has issues, a benefit to nurses who would exclusively work night shift. We all know night shift, weekends, depending on where you're located, can be a thing, but you want to make sure that you're mindful of that when you're having the conversation, so it becomes a lot more fluid. By phone. So I think for a majority of us, our conversations are by phone with our clients, as well as by phone with our candidates. So having negotiations by phone could be a little bit more tricky, or via Zoom. So I'm going to include Zoom and phone as the same thing, because you have to be, at least for Zoom, you have to be more mindful of your body language. So you have to be more mindful of how you sound, if you talk too fast, or if you talk too slow, or if you're taking up too much time. And then you also have to be mindful of any body language as well, because that way, if somebody's talking to you, you're like, if you're one of those who makes facial expressions, you're not off-putting to what the person is saying. As a general rule, body language can determine a lot, especially when you're on Zooms. Um, and then making sure that you're also kind of pausing between what you're saying and the example is this. I am a fast talker. Sometimes I just go. But because over time I've practiced, I have been mindful of moments where I just take a breath and also stopping any presentation I'm giving to give people the opportunity to ask questions. And then as well with the body languages too, if the person is countering or they, don't agree with something that you're saying, that's okay. You kind of stay in that same mode when it comes to Zooms and phone calls. And I'm also going to touch a little bit on the nervousness. So, for some of you guys who don't realize, I do get nervous on some phone calls and some Zoom sessions, depending on what the topic is. And a part of the reason that I have traditionally been nervous about those things is because I'm not familiar with the topic or the person or the company that I'm working with. And doing the research and getting familiar creates a level of comfortability. So it allows you to be more comfortable with the conversation and it becomes a little bit more fluid. And that's ideally what you want because the more comfortable they are, the more comfortable you become. And not only doing research about them, but making sure that you've done all your homework about your company. So if they ask, well, which is a common question that people have said, oh, well, how many nurses do you have on staff? You need an answer. Well, how many CNAs? Well, I've even heard NOSA say that some business owners have asked them, well, how much is your, other agencies have this bill rate? Well, how did you come up with that bill rate? So not every question or counter response back is something that you have to answer. Because in the instance where the person said that the company asked them, well, that bill rate is too high, our other agencies charge this and that. And the question was around, well, how did you come up with that bill rate? As a matter of fact, I can tell you how I came up with that bill rate. And whether or not you choose to go in depth, but it's more about you being prepared. That's a common question, and I'm sure you guys have any. If you want to drop some in the chat, that's a great question, and I could talk through some of how I would counter it. And the last part about being on the phone is having a pleasant voice. Where you're talking in that you're not too loud, you're not too soft. They can hear you. You can articulate, your requests or needs, and be able to move through the conversation easily. So the last one is about negotiating via email. So I prefer this. One, I prefer this probably because I'm a nurse. So if it wasn't in writing, it wasn't done. Two, it eliminates interpretations. So as a business owner, you don't want people to have to interpret what you mean by different things. If you didn't write it down, you didn't mean it. If you didn't make it clear, that's your fault. So putting in an email, having people look at it. I always tell people, hey, on your bill rates, you have regular bill rates, per diem, contract, and you have an overtime bill rate. As an employer, it is your responsibility, not the facilities, to pay overtime. So if you are going to pay overtime, you need to bill overtime. Guarantees of language in any negotiation around guarantees. If you did not put it in your contract, it does not matter if there is a guarantee or not because it wasn't written down. If there's holiday pay, if you don't bill holiday pay, you don't get paid holiday pay. But do nurses and other healthcare professionals on our end of things expect holiday pay? Yes.
Absolutely.
But if it's not in there, if it's not in your contract, you can't be mad at the facility for that. That's part of what you negotiate. And facilities, honestly, because they're businesses and typically they're experienced business people, they are more than willing to accept a contract that you write where you don't include overtime bill rates, you don't include holiday pay, you don't include hazard pay, and have you kind of eat that situation because on the flip side of things, nurses and healthcare professionals expect overtime. You have to pay overtime after 40 hours. In some states, it's 8. You have to pay, or it's expected that you pay holiday pay. It's expected now with COVID that there's a hazard pay. So you want to really think through all of that, and going back and forth via email kind of creates a trail to kind of say, hey, well, we agree to this, we don't agree to that, we want this in, we want that out, type of thing. And it's just easier to look back on later as well as duplicate. Any questions? I think we got something here. Okay, so Laquana said that her nurses did leave for higher pay with the 1099. CNAs actually prefer to be W-2 over 1099. Yes, especially in this climate. So your nurses left, your CNAs did not. Okay, that's understandable. Marquiza, did I say your name right?
It's Marquise, but it's okay.
Marquise. Okay.
So yeah, as far as that's why I wanted to listen to this Zoom call, because that's what I'm still trying to work out as far as the bill rates for different tiers. And I don't have one for holiday, hazard, overtime. And I'm just trying to figure out how to calculate that. Are there any templates or any resources for that?
Well, I can send you something separately. Kind of like the 1099 piece. It's not something I want to get into in depth. I want to kind of keep it on the talking about negotiating and stuff, but I can send you something separately. Just message me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I kind of got an idea that it's like, I know it's time and a half or whatever your regular rate, your regular rate is, but I wasn't sure. Like I said, with us still having the COVID and it's flu season, and like, what if they call at the last minute and somebody asks me, well, are they going to pay a
I think you muted yourself.
I'm
Marquise.
sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I wasn't sure, like you said, how to handle that as far as negotiating that, even with a contractor or a facility.
Well, I will say this much. Any pay, anything different than your regular hourly rate that you're paying your employees or anticipate to pay your employees needs to also be a bill rate. So holiday, overtime, because you're the employer. So the responsibility to pay those things out is to you. And unless you invoice it to your client differently, you'll pay out an overtime rate on a regular bill rate. So you kind of have to remember that, these are things that you have to consider when you're putting together your contract to your client.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? And then the last part of the presentation, guys, is kind of the language, which I think most of you guys, that's what you're interested in, or that was kind of some of the responses in the post. So I'll let you guys ask any questions. I'll wrap it up, and then if you have any questions at the end, you can drop them in the chat box or you can unmute yourself. So a big part of the art of negotiation is the language. And sometimes, kind of like I mentioned before, that's a skill that you have to work through a little bit, because sales, marketing, negotiating, doing presentations, that's not something many of us do on a regular basis, but it's something that you can learn, or it's a soft skill that you can learn over time. So you can learn something like an accounting, you take a class, you figure it out, you know how to do it. But building up the confidence, making sure that you're comfortable, making sure that your message is getting across is something that you have to do over a period of time that's a little bit different than the other skill sets. So here are a couple of words and phrases that you may want to think about, that leave ambiguity, that signal that the other party is open to a giving proposal. Look specifically for words such as can you, possibly, perhaps, maybe, or acceptable. in the language that they either say to you or write to you. Also, if the party uses a phrases such as anxiously awaiting your reply or looking forward to it, this may signal that the party is enthusiastic or optimistic that an agreement may come soon. And some things to think about when you have those responses, looking forward to connecting with you, can't wait to hear back. Okay, that works, acceptable. Is that even though they may be showing interest, they may still need time and depending on where they are in the chain of command at their particular organization. So many times for us, when they say, okay, yeah, I'm definitely interested, send me over your contract, that's a good phrase. It will fall within this category. But there may be needing more time on their end to go through the process. So you have to be mindful of that, but you always want to follow up. And as I say quite often, is no does not mean right, not at all. It just means not right now. So you want to position yourself that you're continuing, even if you haven't got a response like that or a return contract, that you're continuing to foster that business relationship. The next one is around when an opposing party makes an initial offer or a counter proposal. You want to think about if they give a reason. So there are instances where clients will tell you your bill rate is too high with no explanation. But if that's the only issue that they have with what you're offering, there's some room for negotiation. There's some room to consider, hey, are you guys going to also give us per diem and contract opportunities? Are you going to give us access to other facilities? Could it possibly be a situation of renegotiating the rates later? So if it was me and a client said, oh, your bill rates are too high, but I'm comfortable, that's the other piece with lowering the bill rates. Because when you send an offer to a client, you really want to come in on the top end of your bill rate and allow them wiggle room to come down. You never want to start at the bottom of your bill rate. And all of your bill rates, in my opinion, should be a range. So it should be a low and high end range, but even within the range, you're still making a profit and you're still comfortable with the profit that you're making. So that kind of automatically allows for some wiggle room to do counter offers. The language around, oh, your bill rate is too high, sometimes is saying that they've done research on your company. They know that you're a new company, assuming you haven't shared this information. They know or feel or sense that you may not be experienced in the business, and maybe during your presentation or some sort of communication, you gave off the notion that you might be eager to place people versus, of course, I have a network. I have a whole network of 3,000 nurses, no problem. And I'm not going to say taking advantage of it versus just kind of negotiating it, negotiating how low they can go. Another opposing language a lot of times people say is, oh, well, my other agencies rates are lower. The other agencies that I work with, rates are lower. Some things to consider in that situation is, do you really know that it's true? They could just be calling your bluff. Is there other benefits in that scenario to that business relationship? What other agencies are doing does not matter. Most people, and I would suggest for you guys, you should never lower your rates based on what other agencies are doing. They don't have your overhead, they don't have your experience, they don't have your expertise. So you don't ever want to make that a reason that you're going to lower your rates. But a better reason would be, okay, we want you to lower your rates to here, wherever that is, and we're going to give you access to these 5 other facilities. And we're going to, give you exclusive rights to first placements, or connect you with our sister property, which happened to one of the noses of Pennsylvania. Those are opportunities where it makes sense to lower it. And then you also always have to consider, you can renegotiate later. But if you're just looking to get your foot in the door and you don't have like I was mentioning, you're not experienced in the business, then you have less and less things to negotiate or less negotiating power. But in 6 months, assumedly everything works out, there's your opportunity to use, hey, we placed this many people, they work this many hours, and this is stuff you guys should be keeping track of. You know, we've consistently placed weekly, every weekend, individuals, top nurses, name request nurses, or CNAs to your facility. You know, we've done these different things where they can't say they haven't had good quality experiences with you from a business perspective. And then finally, the compromise. Um, Always be willing to compromise. Not every opportunity or not even every contract is a contract that you have to place. So I tell people, if it's a good contract and they're not giving you the rate that you're comfortable with, consider a couple of things. Could this contract leverage me or be a springboard to another contract? That's something I would consider. Are they putting minimum, when most direct clients do not, requirements on me as a business owner or staffing agency to place? Okay, so I need you to place 15 people. I need you to place 10 people a month, 25 people every 3 months. Are they having specific requirements either in their contract, which is where it should be, but in general, that I have minimum placements like we would see as minimum hours for PRN shifts as a staff nurse? If they're not, that's okay. But in having that initial contract, which is I think where people struggle a little bit, when you go to talk to the next facility or the next client, you're guaranteed, I'm going to say that I work with this other facility. You don't have to get into how many hours you place, but you can if you're doing really well at that facility. Well, I place, 25 nurses every week. We're billing 12,000 hours or 10,000 hours. Mind you guys, I'm just throwing numbers out there. Then I would definitely be willing to have more of a conversation with you in that scenario, if that's the situation. But most facilities don't necessarily ask that question. You should have an answer to it. But just you saying, hey, I'm working with Kindred Healthcare in Delaware, and I'm talking to Signature, or I'm talking to Health Source, or I'm talking to a hospital, them knowing that I already have a established relationship with a similar facility is a great selling point, and it's also a great negotiation tool. And then the very, very last part is no agreement, no worries. So in an agreement cannot be reached, which definitely happens. You don't necessarily have to close the door. It just means not right now. It means that, hey, there's an opportunity to cultivate that relationship and keep in contact and reach out every so often. I encourage all of you guys at this point to reach out to all the facilities that said no or maybe or haven't gotten back to. It's the holidays. Everybody is going on vacation for the holidays in healthcare, and it's COVID. So it's an opportunity for you to go back to the negotiation table with them now that you've had some time most of the year, figure out what makes sense, create a range for your bill rates, and then see if they hit somewhere in the middle just based on desperation of it all. So as always, if you get the chance to negotiate, you always want to make the first offer. So any calls with clients and things of that nature or Zoom sessions, you always want to make sure that you're in sending them the contract, that's your best offer to them, or talking to them about the contract, you give them the best offer. If they counter, that's okay. That means they're still interested. So you want to open the door to negotiating other things that are important to you as a business owner. If you're looking to grow, if you're looking to move out of state, those are other things that you can incorporate in that particular deal. You want to listen. You want to make sure that you're meeting the needs and you've done enough research on the company to understand what their needs are and what they might be. And then you want to give it time. So sometimes, deals come back quickly. And then sometimes it takes a couple of days or a couple of weeks. So you want to give it time. If it works out, that's great. If it's not a win-win at this time, just be willing to revisit it later. So that's all I have, guys. I hope that made you guys feel a little bit more comfortable about negotiating and things that you can negotiate. I'm going to answer a couple of these questions. If you want to ask a question and take yourself off of mute, feel free to do so. And we'll go from there. So Tanya has a question. What is the profit margin you should stay between? It depends. So just like the 1099 question, and I think there was another question. It depends on what your expenses are. So everybody's scenario isn't the same when it comes to expenses. So the average, and it doesn't take into consideration funding and things of that nature, is the profit margin is probably between 25 to 30. I haven't seen 50% profit margins, but it's not to say it's not out there. But you want to stay within what makes sense for your business and also the cost that you have. So it's hard to say the profit margin when you can't take into account some people do funding, some people do back offices, some people have internal staff. So that all would play into what your ultimate profit margin would be, or what would make sense for your business. Oh, Shanika says she totally comes off as eager. Let's work on that, Shanika. People sense that. You'll be surprised what people sense. And some of it is just through practicing. So practicing your cold calling, practicing different scenarios. You guys can use some of the scenarios I talked about and what you would say. And as you do it over time, it'll become second nature, your responses to, well, my agency, the other agencies I work with, their bill rate is much lower. Well, how did you come up with that bill rate? If you don't have an answer to it, work on it today. Your bill rate is too high. If you don't have an answer to it, work on it today. So that each time you're having that conversation, you're able to switch and move around based on what they're saying to you, because you've already prepared an answer. Okay. Laquana says, how can you ensure that they are using you exclusively or giving you 24 hours to place first? There's no way to know it. I mean, you can ask for anything. Like I said, everything's negotiable. There's no way to know that. But you kind of have to establish like a business, a level of trust with your clients. So if that was the intention, they agreed to it, I'm just assuming they're doing it. So, and you should also see some consistency based on your schedule, your previous schedule. So kind of keeping records of how much scheduling you're doing with facilities and things of that nature is to your benefit. Okay, yes. Nice to meet you guys. All right, so it's almost 2:30 and I've been chatted up. If you guys have questions, drop them in the chat box. If not, I'm going to call it a day. And we'll see you guys next time. Any questions? You can take yourselves off of mute. Okay. All right, so it looks like you guys don't have any questions for me.
I have one. Can you post,
okay.
Post your link to your website? I wanted to schedule a meeting with you.
Oh, okay, sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Also, I sent you a private, I guess, a direct message in regards to coming up with the billing rates for hazard pay, overtime, and things of that nature. If anything, could you please send me that template as well, or that information that you have?
Okay, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I did get it. Okay, anybody else? Ask your questions. The clock is running down. All right, so if not, thanks for joining. Thanks for hanging out with me today. We have a couple of other fun presentations happening at the end of this month and next month, so definitely check it out. All of the videos that I do here and in the group are on YouTube. So if you're not on the YouTube channel, go there. So there's way more content there. Thank you guys. So check that out. And the YouTube channel is the Nurse Owned Staffing Agency. So you can check us out there. Other than that, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Definitely check out the events tab in the group for more information about the last 2 upcoming events we'll be doing towards the end of the year. As always, thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll be chatting with you.